Hi everyone, this is Annalisa with Journey to the Goddess TV, where I regenerate ancient feminine wisdom for modern women. Today, I am so fortunate to have Dr. Mala Setty with me. Dr. Mala Setty's life has been rooted in the Hindu deities. She earned her PhD in mythology with an emphasis in depth psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. Somewhat of a maverick, because she also has her bachelor's and her master's in computer science. She has worked as an aerospace engineer for nearly 2 decades. Interestingly, symbolic thinking is critical to both mythology and engineering. A circuit diagram, a fairy tale, or a Hindu ritual all encode something of value for us. She is delighted and honored to give us an overview today of the DEVī within Hindu tradition. Thank you, Mala, for being here. I'm so delighted and honored to have you.
Thank you, Anna, for having me present and really happy to contribute to the furtherance of understanding the goddess. Let's start with an invocation. Sahana vavatu, Sahanau bhunaktu, Sahaviryam karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So the prayer we just chanted is from the Vedas, and it means, may we learn together, may we not misunderstand each other, may we benefit from our learning together. I'll start with a brief overview of our lecture. Basically, I'll be covering the Devi, or the primordial goddess. I'll approach her from various perspectives. One is, of course, the archetypal perspective, or the depth psychological perspective. Another is that of Hinduism and the Hindu traditions. And I'll weave these two together with another thread from the life sciences, because I am approaching Devi as an archetype of life. So this is life as we understand in the lived way, and what we also have gathered in terms of knowledge in the life sciences. As I move on, I will be supporting what I will be talking about with graphics. So let the images work with you as I talk my way through them. They are part of the alchemy that comes with creation of consciousness. Image and word and narrative all come together. So with that, and before I continue, I'll read out this quote that has been my guiding force as I have investigated Hinduist traditions through a depth psychological lens. And it's by Carl Jung. And it says, the East teaches us another broader, more profound, and higher understanding through life. And that shall be the focus that will keep us, that will guide us through our understanding through life. So first we'll start with getting a basic understanding of what is an archetype. What is an archetype? Archetype expresses energy, that is life energy or psychic energy. In this context, we will use the term Shakti. So an archetype expresses Shakti in a particular way. It has a vitalizing and numinous quality, and it is inherited, collective, and shared. That means it is not individual, it is common to us, to groups, or smaller or larger. And it is also meaningful sociobiologically when it is expressed. I mean, its very presence means that it has some meaningfulness in a living being's life, in the lived life. So let's just take an example. A common archetype is the archetype of the mother. So the archetype of a mother is not unique to any one individual or any species. It is a quality that is shared among many species, yet it has a unique expression. In mammals, motherhood means gestation, then delivery, then nursing and nurturing the child until that child is an adult. But in a bird, among birds, the archetype expresses itself as laying an egg, then the hatching of an egg, and the feeding of the newborn. So there is a sense that life energy, while it is collective and shared, it is also meaningful both to the organism and to the collective. So that vitalizing quality and numinous quality that we talk about in the context of an archetype is more than just at that biological level. There is some sense that it is almost in line with what we'd call a sacred feeling. And that energy is often expressed as nourishing water, or air, as in life, breath, or as flames. This graphic is from Carl Jung's Red Book. So the word that is used in various cultures connote all these qualities. In Latin, we use the word pneuma for life breath. And in the Western cultures, Semitic cultures, the word ruh is used. And in the Hindu cultures, there are many words. One is prana, which has the same connotation as ruh and pneuma. But then there are words like rasa, which connote the quality of water, and there is raga. Then there are words like, of course, shakti and agni. These are all different qualities or different words from the Hindu tradition that connote all these qualities of life-givingness, of water, air, and the energizing quality of fire. So the word Shakti connotes all these things, and it has the association with both energy and with power. And because life is often attributed to the mother, or the feminine, because we as human beings, we are given birth to by our mothers. The feminine quality of Shakti that is common in these images, here we have a woman sitting, and here we have a woman in the moon. That is coming from our perspective, our anthropocentric perspective, because we talk about these things in our context. But all the time we have to be aware that this energy is well beyond our human species. It actually encompasses the cosmos. So let not the images, limit us to think that the archetype is relevant only to us human beings. So how are archetypes identified? In the context of depth psychology, we use information from various fields. It is definitely an interdisciplinary approach. We use comparative symbology from religions and contemporary social sciences. We use comparative mythology. Again, the source is religions, but it doesn't necessarily need to be religion. It can also be fairy tales, folk tales, and rituals. And another important source is just social sciences itself, the different social sciences, of which anthropology and archaeology are very important. And because archetypes are relevant to life, what we can learn from the life sciences is also very important in terms of practicality, in terms of what these symbols could mean in life. So when we look at all these different perspectives of how our architects express themselves, we actually use a term for archetypal data, and that term is imago, and the plural for that is imagos. So let's take an example here. We have the symbol of the tripleness of the goddess, so normally called the triple goddess. We have Hecate from the Greek tradition, and the icon, the symbol of the Devi from the Hindu tradition. We have the full moon flanked by the waxing and the waning moon from the Wiccan tradition. And we have the three swirls united together from the Celtic tradition. So these are all tripleness of the goddess, but you can see like here, these are more symbolic and less anthropomorphic, while here we have the face and here we have the full body. You can see that there is a different approaches here to the understanding the symbols, and clearly we are drawing in from mythology, from religions, from anthropology, and then we are seeing how these are expressed in people's lives, both from archaeological perspective and from today's perspective. So all these form the databases from which imagos are drawn. So let's take a deeper look here into the primordial goddess, or DEVī, and we'll take a deeper look at her. We talked about the tripleness earlier. Here's the Wiccan image, and here the moon is embedded with the five-pointed star, the Star of Venus. And as I had pointed out, here's the Devi with her three eyes. And this is a bigger image of her. And you can see her in the context of other prehistoric images. Actually, the Anatolian image of the goddess here, Cybele, is the oldest in the human traditions. It goes way back, almost to 15,000 BCE, going back into the Upper Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic ages. And then she evolves into the Greek Cybele. And here we are still talking about the area of Turkey and Greece. And now here, if we move on to the Semitic areas, here's an image of the triple goddess. And I may be mispronouncing this, but here are their names: Al-Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. And here we have the Hindu Devi Durga. You can see so many common aspects here. One is, of course, the tripleness. Another thing that is, another thread that's running through centuries and through vast spaces of time and continents is the image of the lion or the big cat. Here she's sitting on a throne flanked by lions. And same here. Here they are standing, but you can see the lion is like their seat. And here as well. Here this is a stone image just like this, except that in the Hindu context, the stone has a layer of gold sheet that has been put on the stone. Again, there's a quality of luminosity, there's a quality of energy, there's a quality of power. And among all these traditions, the ones that are still alive from the Paleolithic times to now is the Hindu tradition. The others have been supplanted by monotheistic traditions, where the goddess has less of a presence or has lost that kind of a prehistoric presence that we have in the Hindu tradition and in the Wiccan tradition or the Celtic tradition. The Wiccan tradition is alive, but it is not as vibrant as it is in the Hindu tradition. What I mean is that the goddess culture is still alive and vibrant in the Hindu tradition. So approaching our understanding of the primordial goddess from the Hindu tradition gives us, I would argue, a much deeper understanding. And that understanding can be actually applied in our understanding of other cultures, especially prehistoric data and pre-Semitic data from other cultures. So then let's take a look here of the Shakti body, what I would call the subtle body. We understand life from the earthly perspective in terms of different genomes, different species. And from religions, we know that there is an underlying spiritual basis. So while this has a kind of a universal quality. This has a very particular and earth-based individual and social qualities. And in between these two is what we call the subtle body, the Shakti body, as I'm calling it, the archetypal body. And there are many words that connote this subtle body. One, of course, that is, that has long history in the Western tradition is psyche. And another term is anima mundi, which means the world soul or the animated world. Similar terms in the Hindu tradition are hiranyagarbha, which means garbha means womb or embryo or interior or fetus. And hiranya means gold or that which is numinous. So that golden cosmic womb from which new forms come and into which forms devolve. And then there's a term that we can just use from like a cross-cultural perspective. And we can, instead of subtle body, we can also use the word symbol body. Because earlier we looked at how imagos are symbols that have meaning. The word symbol also connotes bridging, as bridging the earthly realm to the spiritual realm. So that bridge works both ways. So symbols evolve and devolve in the subtle body as they connect. That idea is well captured by the term linga sharira in the Hindu context. So some of the words that we can use for the Shakti body that help us illuminate the idea of archetypal psyche or psyche herself is hiranyagarbha, the luminous womb, linga sharira or the symbol body, sukshma sharira, which means subtle body. So these terms are complementing the terms we have from the Western tradition as psyche and anima mundi. So this imaginal ecosystem or the symbol body that is psyche is made alive by what we would call mythos. That the ecosystem of mythos includes sacred symbols, sacred sounds, rituals, stories and myths, texts and scriptures, places like temples, and sacred events like festivals. This is the lived life of the symbol, and it is that imaginal ecosystem that is alive in the, not necessarily in the biological context, but also in the imaginal context. So we are overlaying spirit, the subtle context of the imaginal body, and then the lived life of culture and meaning in the individual and in the community. So with that, I will move on to using just Devi, the primordial goddess, to understand various aspects of archetypal psyche. Again, I am using the Hindu mythos to shed light on the primordial goddess and archetypal psyche as from the perspective of the goddess. So psyche is seen as one body with many Shaktis. Just as in the human body, we have many organs, this is not an hierarchical relationship. There is an inter-network, of, how do I say it, of well-being where all these are coming together and functioning together for the well-being of this one body. We may think of them that as unity, but we have to think of it also in terms of diverse entities coming together and they're functioning as a whole. So psyche's differentiated wholeness is what I want to bring out here. And that image of the differentiated body is shown here in the image of Adi Shakti. Adi means primordial, and we have learned that the term Shakti means both energy and power. So that primordial goddess, as she powers the universe in her varied forms, is what is shown in this image. And in a more symbolic aspect and less anthropomorphic way, it is captured in this Sriyantra, which is the yantra of the goddess. the geometrical form of the goddess. So that context of manyness in one body, that as different archetypal energies working together is shown here in this kind of an image. But again, we do not want to reduce it to the feminine image. The same idea is shown here in the context of Vishnu, who is the Purusha, or the Virata, in his form as Virata Purusha. You can see here again, it's a male body versus the goddess's female body, but you can see the images of the various deities. But in this image, you can see how the many Shaktis and the one body is contextualized in the cosmos. So this is really Psyche's ambit, her macrocosmic ambit. So when we say anima mundi, we don't mean the world, we mean the animated cosmos. It's more than the world. So at another level, we can approach Psyche as from a fractal perspective. What do we mean by the term fractal? A fractal is where the unit has the same qualities as the whole. So like in this image, this is the whole of globes, and then the unit is also a globe. You see the fractal quality in nature, in leaves, in trees. And you also see it at the level of cosmic energies. Everything comes into being, everything lives, and everything devolves back to energy. And that kind of quality is shown in this image. This is the fractal quality of Psyche. And another is it's scalable. When we use the term scalable, we mean that it can grow, just as like a tree can grow. And at the same time, it's also holistic. As we pointed out earlier, holisticness means it's a differentiated whole. It is not uniform. Each of the units has within it a differentiation. So that term that is used where a fractal is also a whole is holon. It comes from Greek to us. So holon is a fractal that is whole. So these are all different ideas to help us understand Psyche and Psyche's innate qualities. Other aspects of this Shakti body that is Psyche is that it is dynamic. That means it's a constantly changing flow of energy. While it is dynamic, it's also balanced. At a certain level, it maintains its stability. And as we talked earlier, it is multivalent. That means it is differentiated, but it also has an integrative tendency. So even as it moves out into the open, into variety, it has a tendency to maintain its integrity. So these are the ideas that I wanted to capture by using these images. This is the image of Nataraja from the Hindu tradition. But you can see how the image of the Celtic tree reflects what the image of Nataraja is showing us, that the dance of the cosmos is reflected also in the dance of life within the tree. But this is the dance of energy within each body, each organ, each cell, and the earth, in the planets, in the satellites, in the universes. So that fractal quality, a scalable quality, is what we are looking at here. This is again another image, and here I am juxtaposing all those ideas against the Kundalini chakras. These are the 7 Kundalini chakras, and I'm juxtaposing that against this image, a cross-section of perhaps a tree, but more than that, because here we can look at this as a primal energy that permeates the universe. And as it comes into manifestation, as that Shakti comes into different levels of manifestation through the cosmos and in the earth, in nature, and our human systems, cultures are overlaid in the ecosystems of nature. And then we have the individual as just a leaf in this cosmic tree embedded in this. So you can see how that Shakti flows through archetypal arteries as it differentiates at various levels from that primal energy to the individual. And at various levels, it is forming wholes. And that's what these chakras stand for. Chakra means wheel. There's a connotation of the wheel turning. But the wheel also maintains its integrity and its unity. So at each of these levels, the manifestation maintains its wholeness, its balance, and its integrity. That is the idea I wanted to convey here in these set of images, that energy flowing through archetypal arteries, but networked into wholes, which are nested in wholes, So interestingly, the primordial goddess, her main symbol is what is called the Sriyantra or Sri Chakra. Sri means that which is very auspicious. The goddess is one of the earliest names for the goddess. The primordial goddess is Sri. And the word yantra means device. As I told you earlier, this Sri Yantra is also known as Sri Chakra. So the word chakra means wheel. So that nested quality, where the limited is nested at various levels into various levels of wholes, all the way embedded in primordial energy, that undifferentiated Shakti is captured in the Sri Yantra. So the Sri Yantra is a reflection of the Kundalini's chakra's embeddedness. So at the very center is energy, and it's called Bindu. But that energy itself that we have access to or experience or know, itself is embedded in a larger, much more undefined, limitless energy. So what we know, Bindu, that is just a dot. We are talking now at mega cosmic levels. And then it differentiates. So each of these Kundalini chakras have their equivalents in the Sri Yantra. So the lowest level, which is the Mooladhara chakra, is the 8-petal chakra, the chakra of 8-petal lotuses. And these other intervening chakras of triangles are these other 5 here. But in the Sri Yantra, the individual Mooladhara chakra is embedded in the Kula chakra and the Bhupura. So we can kind of differentiate these two areas, where this part we can say is the unconscious, the archetypal part, while this part is the levels of consciousness, as in human conscious, individual consciousness, collective consciousness, and the earth itself. Bhupura means, Bhu means earth, Pura means city, the city of earth. So while Kula means group, community, and in our context, we will say ecosystem. So this is what I wanted to show with the Sri Yantra. But those archetypal energies can also be seen in the context of complementarities. And the Hindu deities, in terms of the complements, those ideas are depicted in anthropomorphic forms, in the anthropomorphic forms of the gods and goddesses here. At the level of nature, that complementary energies are shown as Parvati and Shiva. And at the level of culture, we can see those energies playing out in the complementaries of Lakshmi and Vishnu. And at the level of the individual, we can see that these are complementaries between Brahma and Saraswati, Ganesha and his consorts, Siddhi and Buddhi. So the masculinity and femininity of these images should be thought of in terms of polarities, that energy flows between poles. Even in a battery, we have the anode and the cathode. And it is when there is the differentiation of these poles, then the energy flows between this. So that polarity clearly is a necessity, as we know, and we see that in life, that energy flows between two levels. But they should be seen as a necessary complements, because together they make a whole. And I'm using these images because each of these chakras have their resident deities. The resident deity here is Ganesha and Bala Brahma, and sometimes even Saraswati is shown here. The resident deity here is Vishnu, and the resident deity here is Shiva. So that is how I have created this chart of archetypal complementarities in using images from Hindu mythos. Again, I do not want us to just reduce this to Hinduism. Always let us think that the archetypal, and let us always be aware that the archetypal complementarities suffuse nature, suffuse the cosmos, suffuse us. Another way to look at archetypal energy and the play of Shakti in psyche is from the perspective of transformation of energy. We know that energy flows, as we have seen from the previous chart of complements and polarities. But in nature, in the cosmos, we can think of transformation of energy from the perspective of these 5 principles. When unlimited energy becomes manifest in creation and expands into the created cosmos, it is known as Srishti. And then when it maintains a certain homeostasis or continuity or balance, then that quality of energy is known as sthiti. And then it devolves. It devolves back into contraction or disintegration or destruction. That transformation is known as samhara. And this tripleness is what you see basically in the triple goddess or in the triangles or the interplay of triangles. Shrishti, Sthiti, Samhara. So if you take a look at the moon as it goes from new moon to full moon is that expansive phase. Then when it stays in the full moon state, we can say it maintains that state. And then when it devolves back towards the new moon, then we can say it is the devolving toward the samhara transformation of energy. And you can see that in all aspects. Everything comes from the unlimited, it comes into manifestation. But then it stays in a certain way, and then it devolves back to energy. So normally we can say, why isn't this 3 enough? But from the Hindu perspective, that unlimited primordial cosmic energy is really, when it comes into manifestation, we say that that energy is being permeated within the manifest world. So we call that enveilment. So each of the chakras from the primordial unmanifest level, each of the chakras then is a series of enveilments. Interestingly, that enveilment is also seen as a concealment, so much so that when we see nature, we may not always see that nature is really a manifestation of that primordial energy. We may just stay there at that level. So that quality of both enveilment, which is also concealment, is captured by the term tirobhava. And yet, we know that we sense that in the numinosity of nature or in the numinosity of our individual lives. We know that these are just expressions of that unlimited, all-permeating, all-pervading Shakti. So that quality, when we see the one in the all or the unlimited in the limited, is that quality of revealment, where the littleness of our lives become the channel for knowing the allness, the unlimitedness of Shakti. So that quality is captured by the term anugraha. And the closest equivalent in English is grace, but it is seen as the grace of the goddess or the grace of the divine. That which is limitless has been revealed to us in our limited lives. And you can see this anugraha playing out in the lives of the mystics and even in the small ways in which we see the beauty of life in our own histories, in our own little dramas in our own life. So that 5 qualities are seen as the Devi's primordial processes. These are the processes of Shakti: Shrishti, Sthiti, Samhara, Tirobhava, and Anugraha. Again, using just images from the Hindu tradition, we are looking at the interplay of archetypal processes or the interplay of archetypes, how they come together, how they maintain balance, how they are networked among each other, and creating this dynamic web of energies to create wholes at various levels. So here is that triple goddess again. In the Hindu context, it's Lakshmi, Parvati, and Saraswati. Same idea, but here it is captured by their male complements, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. Vishnu being the complementary energy of Lakshmi, Brahma the complementary energy of Saraswati, and Shiva is the complementary energy of Parvati. So here's the tripleness, Shrishti, Sthiti, and Samhara, which is especially captured here among these three. Now the fiveness, which includes Thirobhava and Anugraha, is captured here in this five-headed image of Shiva. This is an anthropomorphic image, and here is the overlay of four faces on a round non-anthropomorphic pillar. Again, there's a sense of the unmanifest coming into manifestation and going back. So that play is shown here in the image of Shiva Nataraja dancing. But again, it's shown here in the nested triangles of the Sriyantra. When we go into the latter stages of our presentation, I want us to keep this as the basis in which we understand the primordial goddess, always knowing that our anthropomorphic terminologies, images, the imagos, the mythos, is just an overlay on something that is much vaster and much more cosmic and much more limitless than our little worlds. So that fiveness of the Devi is captured in the 5 petals of the hibiscus flower. That is the flower with which the Devi is worshipped in India. And that here's the image of the goddess. It's a stone image, and her eyes are made more prominent here with silver plates that are overlaid with black stones. And then she's worshipped in red color, which is, it's not a color actually. She's worshipped with kumkum, which is made from turmeric and lime. And that red powder, kumkum, symbolizes Shakti, the life energy. And, the garlands here of hibiscus flowers show how the flower itself symbolizes her energy, her primordial qualities of Sthiti, Shrishti, Samhara, Thirobhava, and Anugraha. So here's a triple Devi, but then here's a macrocosmic Devi in the Sriyantra. So I wanted to bring all these ideas together before we plunge into Devi's prehistoric roots in India. So turns out that India, especially southern and central India, has a lot of prehistoric sites. And they are contemporaneous with other prehistoric sites from other parts of the world, be it Africa, be it the Americas, be it Europe. And these prehistoric cultures have evolved on their own, and they evolved into Neolithic cultures around 11,000 BCE in different parts of the world. And why is Neolithic culture important to us is that it is that time when agriculture started, when human beings went from being hunter-gatherers and making very simple stone tools, living in stone shelters. They started becoming settled communities, and they started learning how to capitalize on the living forms around them to create food for themselves. So Neolithic cultures are studied all over the world to understand how human beings came together to capitalize on the earth's fertilizing energies, the Shakti of fertility. So there's a Neolithic site in the Deccan Plateau of India. This is the Deccan. And these brown areas are the plateau areas. This is like the geologically oldest part of India, because the Indian subcontinent was formed when a tectonic plate that was close to Australia moved north and joined the Euro-Asian tectonic plate. And that's how the Himalayas formed, when the two tectonic plates came together. So the Himalayas are the younger part of the Indian subcontinent, while the oldest parts of the Indian subcontinent are the plateau areas called the Deccan Plateau. So in the Deccan Plateau are several Neolithic sites, of which Sanganakallu is one of them. And the word Kallu means stone in the local language. And at Sanganakallu are lots of petroglyphs, and one of them is this. And you can see how it resonates with the hibiscus flower. But when you look deeply into it, you see it is a layering of chakras. Here's a chakra of the Star of Venus, the five-pointed star, and that is embedded in a five-petaled, what is known as a flower of Venus, which in turn is embedded in a wheel of five cattle. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can see the cattle horns here. So why is the Star of Venus and the petals of Venus important to us? But it gives us an idea that the Neolithic cultures were very well aware of the Earth's embedment in the cosmos, especially with respect here to the planet Venus and the Sun. So from a sun-centric point of view, the Earth, Venus, and Sun line up 5 times in an 8-year cycle. And if you connect those points, you get a star. But from an Earth-centric point of view, and here's the Earth, this is the Venus and this is the Sun. When you see their movements from an Earth-centric point of view, then you get the petals of Venus. So this is a geocentric point of view, and this is a heliocentric point of view. And these two are overlaid here. We can only guess from our perspective that this is what it could mean, but we don't really know what it meant to them. The mandalas give us a sense that they had a pretty good understanding of astronomy. And that is kind of laid out if you look at other cultures, whether it's Mesopotamia, whether it's Egypt. Their understanding of the cosmos was much more sophisticated than ours. So back to what I had said earlier, Neolithic cultures were when what we call agro-pastoral human cultures came into being. In different parts of the world, they came into being at different times. In some parts of the world, they came into manifestation around 10,000 BCE or 9,000 BCE. And archaeologists in India date the Indian subcontinent's Neolithic cultures to a much later period. This area in Sanganakallu is dated at closer to 3000 BCE. But don't let that fool you that these were brand new. And every Neolithic culture is overlaid on Mesolithic culture, which in turn is overlaid on Paleolithic culture. Because in southern India, they have enough data to show that other than Homo sapien, there were many other hominids. There were Homo erectus, and they have found other finds where they are now coming up with a new hominid species that are not seen in other parts of the world. So this is the Sanganakallu site. It's a topographic map of the Sanganakallu site, and it is made up of various hills known as Chaudamma Gudda. Gudda means hill. Hanumanta Gudda, Hire Gudda, and here's a rock shelter, Birappa rock shelter. And here, this Gudda, this hill, is called Sannarachama. I mean, the word Gudda is missing here. Both these terms are terms related to the goddess. Sannarachama is an epithet for the goddess, and so is Chaudamma, while Birappa is an epithet for Shiva. And remember, the goddess and Parvati and Shiva are the complementary energies. And Hanumanta Gudda, the word Hanumanta relates to apes. And there's a lot of ape culture here in this area of India. We can say that the pre-primate cultures led to hominid cultures, which in turn led to Neolithic cultures. Some of the other evidences related to this site is other petroglyphs, especially petroglyphs related to cattle. Here's a picture of the same cattle today. Those breeds are still there in India. And they are communities that raise them, that breed them, tend to them, and they live close to the agro-pastoral lives that the Neolithics must have lived. These are small communities, but they have maintained those traditions. And another interesting thing that these sites have, other than the petroglyphs and the rock shelters, and what seems like sacred spaces in the rock shelters to those communities, those sacred spaces are available, can be seen both in Sannarachama Gudda and the Birappa shelter. Other than these, we also see in close proximity to these rock spaces are huge, what is known as mounds, ash mounds. But there are layers and layers and layers of cattle dung. It's not just dung, the layers of cattle dung has been burnt at a low grade heat into ash. And these are like thousands of years old. And they are miles long and miles deep. Here are more aerial views of some of those spaces. Here, as I had told you, the topographical map of Sanganakallu with the early goddess spaces, sacred spaces of the goddess and her consort Shiva. If you wanted to take a plane trip over that area and take aerial shots of those different Neolithic sites, you can see this is how they would look. This is not Sanganakallu, but it's a place close to that area called Kurugodu. You can see how there are piles of rocks, and you can imagine primate cultures and early hominids living here. And you can see how those rock shelters are surrounded by fertile spaces where water and lakes would have formed and animals would have lived. Many of this land is dotted with these kind of lakes. They're called Kere in Kannada and Cheruvu in Telugu. The local language was spoken here. And these rock shelters, when they are seen as sacred spaces, they're painted with white lines, vertical lines like this, of red alternated with white. The white symbolizes Shiva and the red symbolizes the goddess. That interplay of the two is shown interestingly in these two stones. These stones, I don't know how they are balancing, but it's a natural formation. And you see that idea of that complementary energies suffusing all of life, and that this is a symbol of that shown here. And prehistoric people have painted it like this. And today's cultures, which are, a good 12,000 years later, have continued that. And slowly these rock sacred spaces gave to rock built spaces. Earlier, you can imagine this could have been a cave maybe, but then that cave gave way to a built structure. But again, they're painted like this. Even to this day, temples in southern India have on their outer perimeter, the walls are painted like this in these alternating red and white vertical lines. And interestingly, the word for the interior of a temple is Garbha-griha. Earlier, I had said the word Garbha means womb or embryo or interior. So Griha means home or house, a shelter. So that community, that area where Sanganakallu is, Kurugodu is, that also has other sacred spaces for the goddess, other than the rock temples of prehistoric times. Here's an open-air temple, and here we have a stone, and that stone is etched with two intertwining snakes like this, which connote the Kundalini. And in the previous graphic, there are such stones here. These two are those snake stones, and they symbolize life. And the duality is coming together, and the energy flowing between them is symbolized by these two trees. One tree symbolizes Shakti and the other symbolizes Shiva. So these two trees and the stone here, and there is the Trishul, which is the trident, symbol, and both the Devi and Shiva hold it in their various forms. Again, the tripleness of all of life. And here you see, instead of white, they have used yellow. So the Naga stone, Naga means snake, is here, and it is in front of the tree. And this is open air. But those who would worship, instead of going into a cave-like temple space, sacred space, they would circumambulate this space. And the circumambulation pathway is kept here in this stone floor here. Other temples in that area have actual iconographic images of the goddess. And here she is. And here is her body surmounting the lion, tiger. I believe this is a lion. Yeah. Other than the open air temples, we have built temples which look like this. You can see where humanity has taken the idea of the sacred space from the little cave spaces that nature made by juxtaposing various stones to this. This is a stone temple that has been built, and it is, I don't know how old it is. This architecture became prevalent in southern India around 1300 CE, like 1200, 1300, and came to flourish in the 1500s. And the image of the goddess in this temple is this. Behind all this is a stone. That stone has been overlaid with kumkum. And then she's worshipped with the hibiscus flower. And then there's a numinosity of the gold plates. You can see the snake here. Here are the two snakes. You can see the moon here, the crescent moon. And then there is the eyes of the goddess. Remember, when you go to a temple, it is to get a breakthrough through that enveilment, to see her revealing herself in all her forms. So to see her, we say that she also has to see you, because by her seeing you, she's revealing herself to you. So when we go to a temple, we're going for darshan. The word darshana means to see and to be seen. So that's experience of the sacred space is between you and that divinity. And the divine space, the image in the temple, is seen as a living entity. The goddess is alive, and you know her through the play of energy. It requires us to be in a receptive mode, to see, to allow ourselves to be seen by her, and to be open enough to see her. So this is a Durga temple at Ballari, and both Sanganakallu and Kurugodu are in Ballari district. So with this, I move on to the second phase of our talk, where I'll move on from Devi to Lakshmi.
Thank you for joining us for this first part of Mala's talk. And now we're going to go into a Q&A section. The last thing you said really hit home for me, because I, probably within about a year of when I got back from India, I went to see, do you know who Mother Mira is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to receive darshan from her in Connecticut. And I really didn't know what to expect. I knew it was in silence. She gives darshan in silence, right? And I had this experience where I went up to her, and you sit in front of her, you close your eyes, and then you open them.
Right.
And her gaze was so penetrative.
So you have experienced.
Yeah, I was so vulnerable in front of her. Like, she saw me.
Yes.
And I couldn't hide. And that was the scariest thing I'd ever, terrifying, because to be seen, to be vulnerable like that in front of a person, even though I understand she's known as a living embodiment of Mother Mary, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so that was a really life-changing experience, because it was so jarring to be seen in that way. But now I understand through what you just described in going to the temple, and she has to see you in order to be known herself, I think is how you said it.
Right. And by the way, that is how we ought to see each other, you know?
Yes.
I mean, our conversations about gender, race, all that, it seems trivial, you know, in front of this.
Yeah. In front of the depth.
You know, this is what we do when you do namaste, right? You and I are one, and I bow to the self in you. So when you see, when you can inculcate that way of seeing, it's like a physicist seeing this desk, but knowing the atoms, you know, but seeing the atoms at the desk like that.
I have a question about the symbolism of white and Shiva being associated with white. What does white symbolize?
Okay, white It's the closest to colorlessness. All colors are in white. Again, genderizing this is just for our benefit. Shiva means that which is auspicious. Devi means that which is luminous. Shakti means energy. But the thing is, energy is known only when it comes into manifestation. That's why anything that's related to the manifest world is given the quality of the goddess and redness. But the two are interspersed. You can think of it in terms of polarities, but the polarity is between the limited and the unlimited. About everything coming from the limitless and everything devolving back to the limitless. Okay?
Yes, I'm still curious as to why these different polarities, why one is understood or perceived as goddess and the other polarity is perceived as Shiva. Why wouldn't they be reversed?
Because we are human. And I'm sure if we were amoeba, the images would be different. We are human and we have two genders. In our context, life comes from the feminine. So anything that's manifest is given that feminine. We think it comes from the goddess. That is why you see a predominance of feminine imagery across the world, across other culture. I mean, it's not just our culture, Hindu culture. You see that everywhere. It's just that because we have anthropomorphized the idea of God, that it is difficult for us to transcend that limitation. Because energy transcends everything.
I'm really excited to get into the later sections, more into living systems and
yes,
that, because I've been doing my own foray into that research as well. Yeah.
So back to your earlier thing, psyche also has a feminine connotation.
Right.
Right? So why? Again, the idea that it is the vehicle of manifestation. The Hindu mythos looks at, how do I say, the best way to understand the Hindu mythos is from the perspective of the unconscious, not from the perspective of the individual consciousness. That's like the leaf trying to understand the tree. The leaf is there because of the tree.
Right. I think that goes back to a conversation we had before on this concept that from the Hindu perspective, children are born individuated.
Right, because the self permeates everything. When we talk about the fractal quality of the universe, we're really talking about in terms of the self permeating everything. So the term is Atma and Paramatma. Atma for the individual self and Paramatma for the cosmic self. So Adi Shakti is also known as Para Shakti. Para means all pervasive, beyond anything we know.
Something else I was thinking about when you were talking is, if, as you've presented, Shakti is energy in, at all of these different levels, from the primordial energy down through, manifest through the individual. Given that and the inherent interconnectivity of all life.
Right.
How is it that we continue to, because of the violence and the war and the degradation, it's all Shakti's energy doing it to Shakti's energy. You see what I'm trying to get at? It's like it's all Shakti, but somehow because we forget that, it's all permeated divine energy, and yet there is still an antagonism. We're all one. We forget that, and we act as if we're not one.
So when you look at natural systems, you see all life forms thriving together.
Yes.
I mean, it's not that there is no prey and predator type of relationship. But generally speaking, all creatures do not take more than they need. So the antagonism comes from us not seeing ourselves as part of the network of life, as being apart from it. And that is going to be the final flow of my talk. But you can also see in a human being, imagine how cancer goes when the manifestation of cancer is that there's one kind of cells that start multiplying they do it to the detriment of the entire body. And what does that lead to? That leads to death. It's actually an abnormal situation, right? It's a disease. It's not health. So there's always, in the context of Shakti and human life, when one is aware that the Atma permeates, every being is endowed with Atma, and that we're in a network of mutual living, what that would lead then is to a much more conscious way of living. What we would call conscious consumption. When you look at human history, for the most part, the human species has not been detrimental to the earth. They've been detrimental to the earth only recently, over the last 50, 60 years. Population has grown, but this kind of a cancerous behavior has come about only lately. So the question finally devolves to us as human beings, and the kind of cultures we have created.
Yeah, and I look forward to exploring that more in the second half of your talk. So there was also the beautiful slide you showed early on of the mythos, the imaginal ecosystem, and the lived life of the symbol. And, having been to India, I can attest to, that is permeated, in my experience, permeated through every aspect of life.
Yes.
And in the West, not so much. It's not a lived experience that I've experienced here. And I really felt that difference when I was...
You did?
Yeah, when I was... Absolutely. And also, as an artist, dancing classical Indian dance theater, learning, there was also a continuum between, my normal life and activity way of being into the preparation for the dance and the dance itself. There was not a hard stop or a separation, right? And so that was the first time I really understood art as life, not as aesthetic. Yeah. And I think I knew in my heart that for me, that's really the purpose of life. But it's so hard in a culture that makes art for entertainment or aesthetic purposes, which is our culture here.
So yeah, I guess you can argue that it is not just our the biological ecosystem, but also the mythic ecosystem. To what extent is that not reflective of the primordial Sakti, right?
Right.
It's a different level of, let's say, toxicity or sterility.
Yeah, and so I wonder, in viewing that slide and having my own experience of being in India for a short while and then being here, I wonder how to transfer that knowledge to other cultural systems, that lived experience of the symbol. And I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it has to arise out of our own mythic symbolism, if we have to revision our myths.
That is the burden of collective consciousness, the responsibility of collective consciousness. And Carl Jung was very aware of that. And his work was actually dedicated to the transformation of collective consciousness. there was the aspect of personal therapy at one level, but at the level of culture, he was addressing that. Because he also lived at a time when of the two world wars. So the pain that you feel now, you can only imagine what they must have felt then. And generally we talk in political terms, but at deeper level, it is the burden of the lack of consciousness in the collective. And it takes work like this. It's one thing to study an ancient culture, but it's another to see that applicability in our life, in our context. And that is another reason why the symbol of the feminine becomes prevalent. The feminine as mother, because the lived experience of mother, is that the mother has the ability to love all her children in the way that resonates with them. And you can talk to any mother, even mothers of twins, they'll say the children are different. And that mother love, it need not be a mother, but to develop a mother love means that you have the ability to modulate the flow and the individuality of a child. And you can see that in the way Mother Nature works. You go to a forest, every living being is thriving, and each species is different. It's not uniform. That is why, since ancients have given the quality of not just the feminine, but the mother feminine, the nurture feminine. But we are enjoined to cultivate that love in every one of us, whether we are male, female, whether we are mothers or not. At the very least, as children, we would have been at the receiving end of that kind of love. But the burden of life, the responsibility of life is now now that we have taken from our mothers, we have to now give it. But it's not motherhood is attributed not just to one's own mother. Culture is mother, language is mother, country is mother, home is mother. At least in the Indian culture, all these things have mother quality.
Yeah.
And the connotation is that of the mother.
Inside. I know inside means womb, but inside.
Yeah, we are inside that, right? We're inside the womb of culture.
Yeah.
We are the children of that. No? So, in this context, being a bad child is like being ungrateful to the womb that's nurturing. I mean, that is very clear in the ecological context, but we can also, in the context of mythos, we can also say that we populate the mythos appropriately.
Yeah. I was just thinking as you were talking too that the goddess is known as Ma too, right? All of them are Ma. Whether or not, I don't even know if all of them have children in their individual mythologies, but they're all considered Ma. Right?
Oh, right. But in the mythic context, a child, just like in any polytheistic mythologies, the spousal relationship is that of the consort relationship, that of ideally it's of balance, the energies balancing each other. And the parent-child relationship is that of one leading to the other. For example, in the Greek tradition, Asclepius is the deity of health, and he has many children. One of them is Hygienia. Hygienia is hygiene. So if you look at all his quote-unquote children, they're all related to good health. So that is how we should understand mythic relationships. These are energies, different qualities of it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for part 1, and stay tuned for part 2 next Friday.